Crash Twinsanity has really cool and just amazing skips, including one of its best, and one of my favorites, the nut skip. But we're not going to be talking about that today. It's been 3 years, but today, I present to you, the viewer, the new Crash Twinsanity 100% tutorial. In parts, of course. That's enough waiting, so let's jump right into it.
Come along!
So let's very quickly go over the new format of the tutorial. At first, I'm going to show you a list of tricks and skips that you're going to need to know before the video starts. Now bear in mind, for this particular video, you do need to know all of the information that I'm presenting you, otherwise you will have a pretty hard time actually completing runs, and it will not be as pleasant as if you do know them, so please pay attention. Let's quickly gloss over the version differences. Or I would, but there's one thing that I need to add that is not technically version specific, but region specific. This is 60Hz versus 50Hz. The European Xbox version can be played at 60Hz, while the European PS2 version can't. In 60Hz, the game has a glitch called slide glitch. It looks like this. And yes, it sucks. Even worse, if you're playing on 360 and it's in 60Hz, you get it everywhere. So don't play NTSC Xbox if you play on 360. If you're playing on OG Xbox, it's okay. If you're on European 360, set the resolution to 720p and then select 50Hz. Trust me, you'll have a bad time if you don't. Two more things to note. Some ledges are easier to land on the Xbox version, and some areas on 360 lag like hell. You can either pause the game or move the camera to reduce the lag, depends on the area. I'll have a separate video dedicated to this, so let's move on. Sliding and slide jumping. Basically the holy grail of Twinsanity movement mechanics. There's no need to press circle or B every single time that you want to do a slide. You can chain slide jumping just by holding the slide button as long as you jump during each slide. Be aware that once you are in the air during a slide jump, you will not be able to change Crash's direction, with one exception, but we'll get into that in a sec. However, you can change direction during the slide itself. Just bear in mind that on NTSC, doing this can cause you to get slide glitch, so be careful. Also, holding the button while going down slopes extends the distance that you get from the slide. Now, when you slide off of a ledge, you can actually control Crash's direction. If you add a jump with this, you get what is called a controllable slide jump. If you do a slide jump, land on the ground, and don't jump again, you won't be able to do another controllable slide jump until after you jump again. Instead, you will get what is called a long slide jump. This is what they look like. This effect also grants Crash another ability, which is used as another core mechanic in Twinsanity movement, the long jump. Let me rewind and show you it again. To long jump, simply jump as soon as Crash is clearly off of the ledge. This trick applies slide jump physics to Crash's normal jump. Even though Crash is in the air, he's still considered on the ground for a couple of frames, and jumping during those frames gives you the long jump. This storage is what we usually call long jump storage, and you only lose it when you jump, not when you slide jump, so bear that in mind. The long jump is useful for clearing gaps that you just wouldn't be able to clear otherwise. It's useful to note that you can't turn Crash's facing angle while doing a long jump, and he travels at the greatest distance when he's moving in the direction that he's facing. One more thing before we move on. If the game lags during a slide, you can actually get something called a super slide. You get tons of speed and distance, but I couldn't record it because of how rare they are. Now there's two different types of double jumps. The high one and the low one. In the low one, Crash kinda somersaults in the air. In the high one, he doesn't. The timing of your second jump dictates which one you get. Also, just so we're clear, holding the jump button doesn't actually make you jump higher. If you've played the game casually, then you know if you fall from a height that's not high enough to kill you, but it's still pretty far, you kind of plop on the ground. For some reason we call this falling damage, even though you don't actually take damage. To prevent this, simply spin just before you touch the ground. There are times where you don't want to prevent this, because this can actually clip you through invisible walls and things. There's another thing to clip through level geometry, and that's with body slams. Sandwich Crash under a very low-hanging ceiling that's actually touching the ground, and then do a body slam. Then jump a couple of times, and then bam, you're through the ceiling. Under certain conditions, though, you may want to turn Crash around. Sometimes the game just likes to thrust Crash in the opposite direction of which he's facing.
I'm stuck!
Now, body slams have their own weird kind of physics, so let me try to explain this as best I can. Body slams kinda carry their own momentum, so if you're moving in press B or circle while in the air, the body slam kinda stores the momentum, and of course you get a slight height gain. However, this momentum is usually lost if you're literally touching the wall, or touching two separate polygons, but I'm not fully sure. You can make sure that Crash isn't touching the wall by doing a spinning body slam. To do one, simply press the stick in the opposite direction just before you press circle. But there are times when even that's not enough. If you hold down on the right stick just before you do a body slam, Crash's head will lift upwards. This gives Crash the absolute maximum height gain when he does a body slam. But for the most part, using the camera and spinning body slams are interchangeable, so use whichever one you like.
Yes, the crystal is mine.
You know, you're not always just Crash when you play Twinsanity, huh? So let's talk about when you are Crash+Cortex. That's when you spin into Cortex and grab his crystal. Now you can do the spin throw, and twin slam, which you should already know what those are. But there is another hidden twin move that you should know about. The twin jump. No, it's not a hidden thing, it's just a trick. Toss Cortex, and then when you see him teleport, jump. You should then land on Cortex's head. Do a double jump off of Cortex's head, and there you go, the twin jump. However, in certain chunks, Cortex does not teleport directly to Crash. You can't do twin jumps in those chunks. When Cortex teleports to you, his position is decided right when he actually starts moving for the teleport. In chunks where he has designated positions, he will actually decide where to go just before that point.
Throw me over there. Trust me. We're pals, right?
I'm sure if you've looked up glitches in Twinsanity, you've probably heard of ways to, well, doom your save. That's if you save at a world checkpoint in a chunk where Cortex does not exist. At least if you load the save file. Also, if you grab a checkpoint and there's at least one chunk of distance between you and Cortex and you die, the game also crashes because he's not in the local, well, data. But if he is, everything will be fine. This is assuming you're Crash+Cortex, by the way. If you're just Crash, this doesn't apply. Okay, let me make something perfectly clear. You do not stop being Crash+Cortex unless the game forcibly takes Cortex away from you, even if you leave him like 50 million years behind. As long as it's not Iceberg Lab. The two Cortexes that you see in Iceberg Lab, except for the one that is at the top place where you fight the ants, well, that's not Cortex. That's called Cortex Creature, and it's only used for cutscenes. You can't become Crash+Cortex by spinning him. Know the difference so you know when you can die and when you can't. One of the biggest differences between Cortex and Cortex Creature, other than the animations, is that you can't jump off of Cortex's head. I know you're seeing me do it in the clip, but let me explain. When you're jumping off of Cortex's head, you're not actually jumping off of his head. Rather, you're considered in the air, just like you are with long jumps. This is also why you can do this for the twin jump. On top of that, this is why body slam clipping off of Cortex's head tends to be a bit of an annoyance. You can also apply the twin jump mechanic to body slam clip through ceilings you can't technically reach or sandwich Crash under. However, it is extremely difficult to pull off, and it's not useful in speedruns. Let's just move on to something else. Okay. Now that we've got the bigger concepts out of the way, let's take care of the little ones. They're still very important though, so please pay attention. In Crash Twinsanity, collision is, well, weird. There are many places where polygons just stick out and Crash can jump onto them. We tend to call these 1-pixel ledges, but they're not really ledges, and they're not really 1 pixel wide. Most of them, Crash will only stay on for a couple of frames, but some of them he can actually stay on. A good rule of thumb is letting go of the stick just as you get above that little ledge thing. And this applies for pretty much everything but what we call blonde ledges. There's only 2 of them that I can remember off of the top of my head, but only one of them is used in speedruns now. To land on one of these ledges, curve the stick from forward to whichever direction that it is that you need to go in. In this case, it's up left. Commit to this until Crash lands on the ledge. Then, as always, you do a jump. The curving of the stick is very specific, so if you're not getting it, most likely you're not curving the stick properly. Also, an interesting thing to note is that Crash's hitbox is actually in the shape of his model. So you can do things like grab gems with Crash's, I don't know, pinky finger or something. This also means that you can hit cutscene triggers that you don't want to hit, and nitros that you don't want to hit with his pinky finger. Now let's talk about ice physics. You deal with ice physics quite a bit throughout the run. Of course, when you're going in one direction and then try to move to another direction, you don't actually go in that direction immediately. That's just the basics of video game ice physics. But when you jump and try to turn, your direction of movement doesn't really move at all. However, there's a way to control the direction of movement. When you land on something with ice physics, just make sure you're not holding the stick and you're not moving. After you land, hold the stick in any direction that you need to go, and then jump. This simple little trick can really make things less frustrating for you. This kind of movement mechanic does actually apply to non-iced surfaces, but it is very slight. Now, the last thing I want to cover is Zombie. And before you say I missed Humiliscate and Roller Brawl, I'm going to cover them for the videos on the levels that contain them. So, what is Zombie? And no, it has nothing to do with your favorite The Walking Dead spin-off. Simply put, a zombie is when Crash's HP reaches -1, but he doesn't actually die. The actual death gets interrupted by a cutscene. Then something else has to happen, otherwise Crash is soft-locked and he can't move. Our solution to that something else is cutscenes that change Cortex's state. This isn't the only way to unlock Crash's movement, but it's the only one that's worked for us so far. But let's not bore you with all the details. Zombie makes Crash mostly invincible, but he can still die to certain things. Here's some clips showing what those things are. Anything not listed in the text above, or in these clips, should not kill you unless I've made a mistake. If I did, please let me know in the comments section below. Let's go over a couple more things and then we can wrap things up. You cannot grab normal checkpoints while in Zombie. You can grab world checkpoints though. If you hit a normal checkpoint or its trigger while in Zombie, the game still kinda thinks that it's activated when it's not. So even when you lose Zombie, you can't trigger that checkpoint. Only ones you haven't touched while in Zombie. And that leads us to our last question. How do you lose Zombie without dying? Remember when I said that it's like Crash's HP has reached -1? To undo Zombie, you just have to make his HP reach 0 again. Basically, you grab a mask. Well, that about wraps it up. Hope you guys enjoyed the video and I hope it's very informative. There will be more, so keep looking. See you next video.